We're now well and truly into 2026. So what's the plan? What are you going to do with the year? Like every time it's like a new year, end of the last year, I always feel like, oh, it's something significant. You know, obviously people set their New Year's resolutions and, you know, I don't really set a resolution, and, you know, whether or not it's worth doing is debatable. I think at the end of the day, if you're the sort of person that knows historically that you can't stick to them, you know, why bother, you know, doing them? But despite that, there's something about it just being the end of the year, and it's good that there is an end of the year, because it just gives you a little chance to reflect and, you know, just look over the last 12 months of your life and think, well, was it worth it? Did I do a good job? Was it a shit year? You know, well done me for getting through it, you know, if it was. So firstly, if you had a shit year, well done for getting through it. If you had a good year, good for you. Yours truly, as always, a bit of a mixture. It wasn't horrendous, but it wasn't significantly good in any way. So I guess that's something. But then equally, me being the highly neurotic, I always try and at least cultivate somewhat of a safety net, I suppose you could say, in order to never fall on seriously hard times. Like, I feel like at any point of time in my life, while it's true that I could be homeless tomorrow, I also feel like there's certain measures in place that would certainly prevent that I've tried to sort of sort out, despite the fact that equally there's a lot in the world that wants to get me to that place, because the world is naturally just a chaotic mess, and it just wants to just cause issues in life. Like to keep things tidy takes effort. To look after yourself takes effort. If the default is to just not do anything, to just, you know, if I just sit back and just like lay here, just staring at the ceiling, eventually I'll die, or I'll get really hungry and I'll be in a state of pain and all that kind of stuff. Not to mention, you know, you've got, there are bills to pay, there's the lights to keep on, all that kind of stuff. Just living life takes a degree of effort and maintenance just to survive it in the modern age. And you'd think, you know, we're a quarter through the 21st century, you'd think that at this point, you know, we were sort of, I don't know, certainly in the kind of sci-fi fictions that I would read or watch, you know, we were sort of somewhat promised more of a utopia, or on our way towards one where life would be easier. Is it easier? Is it easier now in 2026 compared to, say, 2006? I don't know. I ask around and no one says yes. The general consensus is, you know, for those old enough to remember the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, just take me back to that era. That's what people want. There might be some nostalgia back, you know, to your childhood times. I mean, I'm sure if you asked sort of the boomer generation, from, you know, people in their 70s or 80s, what time was the best time in history in your life? Well, they might just say, oh, well, actually, I thought growing up in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s was quite good, really. Maybe not. But regrettably, people that are in their 80s, you know, they're not going to be with us for much longer. So, and they're not really the primary users of the internet that would ever watch a video like this anyway. But so yeah, I think we're all in agreement. There were better times before. Modern day times, most people feel quite unhopeful for the future, which is difficult when you're going into a new year and you feel like now is the time to, you know, assess my life and to think about making changes, making improvements, because that would be nice, but we're living to some degree in shit times. Now, not everyone. You know, there are people who, you know, you're 18 years old and you're earning, you know, $500,000 a year from your crypto scamming or whatever the hell you're doing. You know, you youngsters out there with your crypto scams and your NFTs, which is like, oh, you're so 2024, Ben. Anyway, yeah. So there are people that are doing well, let's just say that. And to those people, I guess, well done. You found a way to game the system and to do, well in life. And hopefully you're at a point now. Because I always think, look, if you're earning $500,000 a year, especially if you're young, but at any age, it's like, well, you're set now. If you've earned $500,000 in 2025, well done you. You've earned more money in that year than I've earned over the course of my entire lifetime. So, well done you. But I think for a lot of us, life isn't that easy. Life is full of debts and bills and all this kind of stuff. There was something on the news recently about people in debt in the UK, and it was just talking about how after, post-Christmas 2025, going into the new year, there were like 2 million people that were suffering from debt. I wasn't sure, it was like some sort of headline about 2 million people in debt. I don't know to what extent the debt was. There's always people in debt, but I think this was more of a sort of serious debt. And it seemed like a lot. It seemed like a lot of people were like in that kind of, holy shit, I'm in proper debt here. I've got proper worries. And it just goes to show, for a lot of people, times are tough. And, for those people, no matter what you're going through, all I could say is best of luck with it, and hope you manage to figure it out this year and move towards something that's a bit more, optimistic or sustainable or whatever. As for myself, I'm supposed to be an artist. I've mentioned this briefly before. That whole art game wasn't going well, as it doesn't for the vast majority of people that set out to become artists, musicians, writers, actors, dancers, basically anything to do with creative arts in general. You're going to struggle. Most people, the vast majority of people, aren't going to make it. And you can get quite good at it and still not make it. I did get a little commission at the end of the year, which I'm halfway through finishing. I'm going to show it, which this isn't an art page, but I'm going to show it just to sort of show what I've been up to. So for anyone into anime and manga, they might recognise this character. Have we got it? We're at a point now I can't even see what's on the screen. But so I've drawn a character. I'm gonna be colouring it in with marker pens, and that's what I've done. But at the end of last year, I've mentioned this before, I had decided that in order to make more money, because the art game wasn't really working out, that I would become a delivery driver for a pizza chain. And basically, I quit that job. I'd had enough. I did it for I worked for a couple of pizza chains. I won't quite go into it. But let's just say I worked for over 3 months delivering pizzas. And in the end, I gave it up. There's a couple of reasons for that. For anyone thinking about earning a bit of part-time money that might have considered delivery driving as a solution to that, or certainly pizza delivery driving, or, let me just spell a few things out or talk about it. So overall, the money is bad. Obviously, I'm in the UK. If you're Canadian, American, whatever, perhaps it's not going to be so bad for you. Perhaps you're going to earn a lot in tips. We don't really earn a lot in tips in the UK, including the tips that I would earn, which was barely anything. I was earning less than minimum wage per hour. I'd say probably on average, I'd probably take home about £10 per hour per day. Now, some of my shifts were limited to 2 to 3 hours on a bad day. So I would go to work. I wouldn't know how long I'd be there for. I didn't know if it was going to be a 3-hour shift or a 8-hour shift. But yeah, I'd turn up for work and then we would see what would happen. And yeah, there were times when it's just you turn up, and for me that's a 30-minute drive into work, and then you work potentially 2 hours, then you're a 30-minute drive back, and in that time you've made £20. Now, for anyone that doesn't have to survive or pay bills, let me just say that is not enough to survive and pay bills. And obviously, it's a couple of hours. It's a side hustle job, but because the work hours were so unreliable, like I didn't know if I was going to get 5 hours in that week or 25 hours in that week. Typically, it was just over 10. I'd say on average, I was probably doing about 11 or 12 hours per week. And Therefore, you think, okay, 11 to 12 hours, £10 an hour per week, that's, close to £500 a month, which is about $600 US. And that, again, it's just not, it's not enough to pay bills. Even as a sort of side hustle, it just, because the trouble is, when you take into account like the commute time, and there was extra time for just dealing with other shit around the job, which I might get into. But yeah, when you just take into account the fact that it felt like half my week. I mean, this is just how it felt, which it obviously wasn't. If I was only working, say, 12 hours, well, plus commute time, maybe it was half a week, getting close to half a working week. But either way, it felt like I was working for half a week, maybe even more than that. And it was just a bit tiring. It was just a bit tiring to have that focus where it was supposed to be, it felt like it was supposed to be like a little side hustle thing that made up, I don't know, like 10% of my life, just a small little thing to bring in a bit of extra cash. And if that was the case, fair enough. But it ended up becoming like half my week. So it's one of these things where it's like, okay, well, let's just pretend that I had worked double or triple the hours and made it a full-time job. Well, even then, it would be impossible for me to survive financially on the income that I was making. So the job in of itself just wasn't sustainable. And the people that did seem to make the job sustainable fully were people that were willing to basically work 7 days a week. So yeah, you've got to be working at least 56 hours, say, a week, which is quite a lot. It's more than the typical average 9-to-5er would work. And that's to sort of have that job, make that job sustainable. And I just didn't think it was worth the effort, because it's not a really good job. Like the driving part of it was fine, but if you're dealing with like co-workers or a manager who's quite difficult, that just makes the job a bit shit. And then you've got the issue being a driver and driving your own vehicle of having to then pay for repairs on the vehicle. So if I'm constantly driving around, hitting potholes and damaging my suspension and getting, just bumper damage or whatever to my vehicle from time to time, it's up to me to fix that. If the tyres are going to go bald quicker than they would have otherwise, well, I have to cover the costs for that. If the clutch or the gears go, I have to get a new, clutch or gears, whatever. So I kind of thought that it just wasn't economically viable as a job. It's just difficult times, if you are having to work a job that just doesn't pay well, like, I feel you, because if you're stuck in it, you're stuck in it and there's nothing you can do. But I just thought, just as a short-term solution to test it out, it was fine, but as a long-term solution, it just wasn't viable. Not to mention delivering in a bad area. I've explained before, you get the local kids throwing stuff at my car, and I'd have to then spend hours in my own time cleaning it. During the course of my 3 months, I had 8 parking fines, and that was for parking within the designated staff car park. And you think, well, how's that possible? If you're going to work and you've been told to park in the staff car park, why would you ever get parking fines? Well, to get through to the staff car park, you had to drive through a certain entrance. That entrance was next to an adjacent car park, which had parking restrictions and had cameras monitoring people going in and out. That car park just assumed that if you were going into their car park or moving through their car park, that you were in fact using their car park to park, and you weren't in fact using the staff car park for some bizarre reason. I appealed all 8 of these fines. It took hours to make these appeals. I appealed from them all. The car park in question basically said, no, you still owe us £800 in fines. My employer was, apparently their legal team was trying to sort of basically deal with that, but I was getting really stressed with all that stuff, and it's just extra hassle and stress I shouldn't be dealing with. And it was just over something absolutely ridiculous, because if this ever escalated, it could go to court, and it would seem highly unlikely that I would have to pay them any money, but just the situation was ridiculous, and that was just something I had to deal with. So anyway, that was it. I quit the job, and And that's that. So end of an era. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens in 2026. Start of a new year for me. This is just really a video, just bookmarking that, just to say that it's the start of a new year. What will I be discussing in my YouTube channel thus moving forward? I've got a few ideas. There's a few topics that I would like to discuss that I think are quite interesting. For example, this idea about having flaws. For me, I'm neurotic. I'm easily sensitive to stress. How do you exist in the world? How do you have relationships with people when you are that way inclined? And it's obviously a problem. It's a problem for you. It's a problem for them because it has these negative consequences. And therefore, how much of that should you offset in your relationship? Like, should you make allowances when other people in relationships are being difficult towards you because you know that, well, perhaps you deserve it. Perhaps people should be difficult towards you because, you know, yeah, they've got their problems and that, you know, you're having to offload your problems onto them. And I want to talk about that idea a little bit more, but I'll save that for another video. This is, like I say, a bookmark video just to ask really, how was your year? Have you got any plans moving forward? And if you ever think about a side job, perhaps don't go into pizza delivery. It didn't really work out for me, and I'm glad that I've quit. But obviously, we now have another problem, money. So, well, we'll figure that out in due course, hopefully. So anyway, thanks for listening, and hope to see you again in a future video.